Welcome to Toastmasters Bay to Bay, where we feature speakers from San Francisco to Monterey. Today we have 2 speakers and 2 evaluators, which is a portion of a regular Toastmasters meeting. If you're not familiar with Toastmasters, it's a nonprofit international organization. We have clubs throughout the Bay Area. It's dedicated to helping people learn communication and leadership skills with a practice and learn by doing methodology. I'd like to start by welcoming up our first speaker. Her name is Shelley Strand. She's from San Francisco, and today she's working on a speech from the Toastmasters manual called the Competent Communication Manual. The goal of this speech is how to say it. She's going to be learning to work with words in today's speech. So please help me welcome Shelley Strand with her speech, Should I Be a Consultant?
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, fellow Toastmasters and viewing public. My talk today is about whether or not you should be a consultant. And I've been a consultant for the last 16 years in the area of marketing and advertising. And throughout building my practice, a lot of people have asked me this very question. And as you can imagine, in this economy today, a lot of people are considering going into consulting. And they ask me, is consulting something that would be good for me? Is it something that I would be successful at? Well, tonight, I'm hoping that by illustrating a little bit about how it feels to be a consultant, as well as sharing a little bit of my story and how I started, I'm hoping to give you some guidelines to help decide whether or not this is the right career path for you. So first, my story. I started out in advertising like many people do at an advertising agency. And we were all young and very driven. We worked very hard and we played very hard too. My coworkers were my best friends. I've made lifelong friendships there and I learned all of my chops at that job. So you can imagine that I was pretty heartbroken when I, with about half dozen of my fellow coworkers, got laid off from that position when a big client left the agency. Feeling heartbroken, well, that wasn't that surprising. But I had another emotion that hit me probably about a day or two after I left the company, and that is, I felt relieved. And I thought to myself, well, this is crazy. I feel like I just got away with something, but I don't really understand why I'm feeling this way. And I had to think about this a bit. It was with a little bit of introspection that I realized I wasn't always satisfied with this job. There was always something missing for me. I felt like, right or wrong, I could probably drive the client a little bit differently. I could manage the relationship in a little bit more creative way if I didn't have somebody who I had to report to. And again, right or wrong, that meant I probably should go into business for myself. I started consulting a couple years later. So, the analogy. My analogy is that of a boat, the captain, and the open seas. So, starting with the boat, if you're going to go into consulting, it is absolutely essential that you think of your business as something separate than yourself, a separate entity from you. Like a boat, it needs to be built, it needs to be maintained, and it needs to be driven. It needs you for these things. But it is not you and the boat as one and the same. This is the difference that will make your consulting the thing that you do between jobs when you look for another job, or a sustainable practice that will last for years to come. So for that boat, you need a captain. And a captain is a particularly good analogy for consulting. Because what do you look for in a captain? You look for somebody who knows what they're doing, who's an expert in their field. You look for somebody to help you get through a traveling situation where you don't know how to drive the boat yourself. This is the same as a consultant. You look for somebody who has expertise, experience, but who is not arrogant. Because the last thing that you need in a situation is to have somebody making decisions based on ego and not on strategy. And thirdly, the open seas. This is where it all comes together. In the open seas, I'm not going to lie to you. Consulting, it can be smooth sailing. The water's calm and the sun is shining down on you and the wind is gentle at your back and you're on the front bow enjoying a Corona. Some in consulting call this Friday. As you can imagine, there hasn't been a lot of Fridays like that lately. Just like in the open seas, in the business of consulting, your business can change on a dime. Those clouds can come in fast and the weather can turn on you. The big client that you had can leave their company and all of a sudden they're not your client anymore. The PO that you thought was open is not open and your last invoice is not going to get paid. So there you are on your beautiful day on your open bow and Here comes the bigger waves. Here comes the rain. This is where your mettle is tested as a captain and as a consultant. If when you're in these swells, let's call them 10 feet, you're kind of going over one and you're between two waves, you just passed one wave and you're staring at a wall of water in front of you. If you think at that moment, you know, I can't wait to turn this thing around and get back to safer waters. Consulting might throw you for a loop. It might not be the thing for you. If, on the other hand, you're between those two waves and you look at the wave in front of you and you say, I'm going to get over that wave is going to teach me something. And when I get past that wave, I'm going to be better. And that is going to lead to success. Well, it might be something you'd want to give a try. Think of it like the America's Cup. The America's Cup is a race that is comprised of a series of regattas, and a lot of people think that you lose some regattas, you win some regattas, and at the end the scores are tallied and that's who wins the race. But a lot of people don't realize that in the America's Cup, you're also judged on things like how you can raise funds for your team, how well you can manage your crew, and how well your craft is built. It's all of these things go into whether or not you've won the America's Cup. And so like that race, in consulting, slow and steady, long and strategic, that's what wins the game. And like any good sportsman, your friends and family are going to look at you and they're going to say, oh God, you're crazy. Why are you doing this? It's so hard. It's so exhausting. It's expensive. It's dangerous. It's not the safe way. If your answer to them is, I do it because I have to, because it's part of me, then you just might be fit for consulting and you might want to give it a try. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Shelley, for that great speech. Can you tell us a little bit about your Toastmasters Club and how long you've been a member?
Absolutely. I'm part of 44 Montgomery Masters. We're a noontime club in downtown San Francisco where a great group of people come check us out.
All right. And have you learned anything in Toastmasters that has helped you be a consultant?
Absolutely. This is why I went into Toastmasters. I wanted to become better at my presentation skills, and it really has helped. I highly recommend it.
Great. Thank you so much. And pleasure listening to you today.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And now I would like to welcome up our evaluator for the first speech. The evaluation in Toastmasters is a way of providing feedback, letting the speaker know what went well, and what can be improved on the next time. Our evaluator today is a division governor within Toastmasters, and he's a member of two clubs, the Altera Innovators and the Next Step Advanced Club. So please help me welcome our evaluator for Shelley's speech, Dhwani Shah.
Dear Toastmasters, viewers, and Shelley, thank you for a wonderful speech. You're right. In these times is when you look at those consultants having beer and you're like, oh my God, why am I not doing that? Why can't I get those imported cars and move around and zoom around in convertibles? And you gave us an amazing glimpse into the life of a consultant. I think your speech today was informative and inspirational. You wanted to inform us about consulting, and when you started, I was wondering, what's in it for me? Why am I listening to you? But you moved on, you gave us amazing analogies about the boat, the captain, and the open sea, and then you also talked about the America's Cup, and then you took us into why we should give consulting a thought. You also described the qualities that an individual requires for succeeding as a consultant. You described how you started your career and one day you decided to give up the job or maybe laid off, but instead of looking for another job, you decided to take on the challenge and go out there and sail your own boat. So I thought you did a wonderful job of telling us about consulting and then inspiring us or asking us to give it a shot if we have it in us. You also balanced it wonderfully by showing us the complete picture and not just showing us the rosy side of the Friday beers. So I thought that was done very well and very balanced. For a few suggestions that I would have to make your speech even more effective, I noticed that you had the habit of pacing a little, and which at first was okay, but it seemed like it was the way you were getting rid of your nervous energy, or maybe you were just doing it. And so I think if you made purposeful movements by moving to one side of the room to the other, while you're making a point and finishing a point and then moving back to other part of the audience would have been much more effective. I do think that you use your hands well, and you had them closer to you, but you did move them and didn't really seem like nervousness. But at the same time, you had numerous opportunities to show the open sea or the wonderful boat or the huge waves, and I think you could have leveraged there. But overall, I loved the speech. I sincerely appreciate you sharing your personal experience and telling us to try consultancy, along with giving us information on how we can succeed and what it really takes to be successful in the field of consultancy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dhwani, for that evaluation. And now, the next part of our show, we have a short video with a world champion of public speaking, Lance Miller. We caught up with him at a recent training seminar, and we spoke with him about some of his experiences in Toastmasters. Take a look.
I'm Lance Miller. I'm the 2005 World Champion in Public Speaking with Toastmasters International. When I won my World Championship speech, it was on the concept of validating what's right and good in people. And, you know, look, we're all human. We're inherently flawed. We're imperfect. It doesn't take any special skill or talent to find an imperfection in another person. Can you find what's good in them and bring that out? Some of the toughest times we have in our life give us the most important lessons that we can carry forward, but we can't carry it forward as baggage. We have to carry it forward as a lesson, and by communicating it and refining it and sharing it with others, we lose the baggage, we gain the lesson. The process of going through Toastmasters helped me find the value in my life, and it wasn't until then that I was really able to see the value in other people and the experiences that they had. And there are so many incredible inspirational moments on a day-to-day basis that are sitting right in front of us, but most of us don't even see them. We're so preoccupied with our problems or where we're trying to go, we're not looking at the value and the beauty of what's happening right in front of us. And that's one of the big shifts I had by looking for speech topics and being in Toastmasters, was appreciating the moment and the lesson of the moment that I could then refine and bring to other people. If you're communicating, you're leading. People are going to listen to you. It's going to affect their life either on a positive or negative basis, and it's going to give some direction to it. And there's a responsibility that comes with that. And it's the ability to stand there and be able to touch the heart and change the mind and make a better world. I mean, if you're going to go learn tennis or golf, you can go out and practice that, and then you're going to play a tournament, you want to make sure that your skills are honed up for the tournament. But there's the tournament of life that we get up every morning and walk out the front door to go do. When do we get an opportunity to practice those skills so that we can continue to excel, but we don't make the mistakes in the tournament, which is on the job, in the community? Toastmasters gives us that environment where we work on our leadership skills, we work on our communication skills, we make mistakes, we screw up, we fail, we find our weaknesses, we strengthen those weaknesses, we identify our strengths, we know they're our strengths, so when we go out in the world, we can actually lead and speak. I'd always had a passion for speaking, but I never really knew if I was doing it right or not. And when I came into Toastmasters, I saw the component parts of how all these things work. And with that, as I started to learn those, it started to affect other areas of my life in a very positive and dramatic way. And so I have found Toastmasters just to be a great organization and a great program to continually develop your communication and leadership skills so that you have those skills honed when you go out in life to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish.
Welcome back. We'll now move on to our second speech of the show. The second speech will be by Anthony Hogan, and he is doing a speech out of an advanced Toastmasters manual called Speaking to Inform, where the goal of this speech is to inform the audience about a particular topic. So please help me welcome Anthony Hogan with his speech, Taxation Without Representation.
Thank you, Madam President. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Those are the words of the Pledge of Allegiance. And every day across America, here in the San Francisco Bay Area and in Washington, D.C., where I'm from, kids say that Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. There's a problem, though. In Washington, D.C., where I was born, the kids who say those words, if they were to grow up and live in Washington, D.C., many of those words would ring hollow. Let me explain. Let's go back to the words. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic. What is a republic? A republic is a form of government where the people elect or choose representatives so that they can then create and execute laws to help create a society. And yet, if you live in Washington, D.C., you have no real congressman. You have no real House of Representatives rep, and you have no real senator. And most people don't realize this. You see, the District of Columbia has a unique situation. When the founders founded the District of Columbia, it was the District of Columbia. It was a federal district in which they did not envision, as it is today, 600,000 people living, working, breathing, sleeping, and playing in Washington, D.C. So what they said was, to have a representative in Congress, you had to come from a state. Well, D.C. is not a state, and D.C. is not a city in a state. So those 600,000 people don't have a real representative. Now, they do have in the House of Representatives Eleanor Holmes Norton. She is the representative from the District of Columbia, but she cannot have that final vote, the vote where a bill becomes a law. And any rights that she has is dependent upon what rights Congress give her. So therefore, she's not a real representative. She's kind of a sort of representative. In the Senate, it's even worse. Washington, D.C. has a shadow senator. A shadow, not even something that's real, because it's not really recognized by the Senate. And their real goal is to be kind of a PR person to say we in D.C. need to have a right to vote. So how can it be a republic? How can you use the word republic when you have 600,000 people who don't have that representation? And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. Liberty is a sense of freedom. In Washington, D.C., they have a city council. They have a mayor. But did you know that that city council, when it creates a law, that law can be, in a sense, have a de facto veto? Because Washington, D.C. is not a state. It is administered by Congress. So there's a committee, actually there's a subcommittee of a committee, we just call it for short the D.C. Oversight Subcommittee, which can actually veto laws and add riders onto laws in Washington, D.C. So if I'm in Washington, D.C. and I elect my leaders, and they decide to create a law, the D.C. subcommittee can actually say, no, we're not going to have that. That's not liberty. That's not freedom. So again, we have another word, liberty, that seems hollow. Liberty and justice for all. Justice for all. Now, the last time I checked, all meant 100%. It didn't mean 99%. It didn't mean everyone who lived in the U.S. except for those 600,000 who live in Washington, D.C. But you know what the reality is? Washington, D.C. pays more taxes than 9 other states. But because we have no true voting representative, what is it? Taxation without representation. Isn't that a founding principle that the United States was founded on? Imagine Boston, you're in the water, you have the tea, and it's like, we don't want England to tax us for all this extra money for this tea. They throw it overboard and we're starting a revolution. But you have 600,000 people in Washington, D.C. who have taxation without representation. To the point that the license plate in Washington, D.C. says taxation without representation. Washington, D.C. has more people than 4 states. But those 4 states, they have 2 senators and a representative. Washington, D.C. has none, except for that one kind of half rep, okay? So again, if you look at these words, republic, liberty, justice for all, I'm not quite sure they really exist in Washington, D.C. And many people, including myself, would say that if you live in Washington, D.C., you might be a second-class citizen. Ironically, when I moved here just a year ago, I moved from Northern Virginia, just 5 miles from Washington, D.C., across the river, 3,000 miles to the other coast. And actually, because my representative, Jackie Speier, sits on the D.C. subcommittee, I have now possibly more power to affect certain things in Washington, D.C. than if I had just moved across the river to Washington, D.C. That's not just. That's not for all. That's not liberty. And that's not truly living in a republic. When you had soldiers from Washington, D.C. serve in World War II, in World War I, in the Korean War, in Vietnam, in the first Persian Gulf incursion, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and they come home to be second-class citizens, and yet in Berlin, you can vote for your representative. In Baghdad, you can vote for your representative. Now, why do I tell you all this? It's to inform you. It's so that you think about these issues. The next time you're watching the news and something comes up about Washington, D.C., you'll think, you know what, Washington, D.C. is more than just the White House. It's more than just the Congress. It's more than just the beautiful mall and the flowery, trees for the cherry blossoms. There are 600,000 people who live in D.C. that do not have the same rights that you do because you live here in California. The next time you go to a Giants game and they might be playing the Nationals and you see them out there, you might just turn to the person next to you and say, hey, you know what? Let me tell you a little something I learned about Washington, D.C. But the most important reason is that I want to create debate. I want people to talk about this. So maybe one day when that kid does the Pledge of Allegiance, every single word that he or she says will be true. So one day when they grow up and they decide to stay in the District of Columbia, they will not have to have a license plate that says taxation without representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for that informative and perhaps thought-provoking speech. Why don't you tell us what club you're a member of and how long you've been a Toastmaster?
I am a member of Rhino Business Toastmasters Club. They meet on Tuesdays in San Francisco. I've been a member since April, which is about 6 months after I moved here. Actually, today is my 1-year anniversary of moving to the Bay Area from Washington, D.C. area.
Well, congratulations on your moving anniversary.
Thank you.
And how did you first get started in Toastmasters?
Actually, oddly enough, in the 1970s, my mom was a toast mistress, which I didn't even know existed. She came home talking about it and, always talking about talking. So when I moved here and decided I need to do something to improve my speaking and to create a network, Toastmasters immediately came to mind. And so I joined Toastmasters.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, thank you very much for sharing your speech with us today, Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster.
And to evaluate Anthony's speech, Speaking to Inform, we have Bill Copeland. Bill is an area governor within Toastmasters, and he's a member of a SAP Toastmasters Club. So please help me welcome Bill to evaluate Anthony's speech.
Thank you. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and viewers, it's a great honor for me to evaluate Anthony Hogan's speech. It was really good. It was inspiring. I never even realized that such a thing as taxation without representation is on somebody's license plate in the United States. I had no idea that this was true. And so I learned another thing. I learned that the Pledge of Allegiance doesn't mean the same thing to people who are in a place like this. And so it was a very good speech. I really enjoyed it. Let me say, you did a lot of good things that Toastmasters teaches us to do. One of the things you were very good at is you had a good, strong voice. I really like your gestures, the way you did this, the way you had movement. You moved to emphasize something. You moved over here to emphasize something, and your gestures were very effective. That's just one of those things that it's hard to learn, but you did very well. Now, you stated a thesis that was not totally clear at the beginning to me, and that is taxation with representation. What does that have to do with being from Washington, D.C.? And so then you gave the Pledge of Allegiance, and I like the way you let the Pledge of Allegiance be your agenda in this speech. You had a kind of something that gave us a question, something to think about at the beginning, and then you went through the Pledge of Allegiance step by step, and you showed us those parts that are not really effective for the people who live there. So I like that. I like it where there's a clear agenda, because we all know the Pledge of Allegiance. We've said it thousands of times. And I like the way you had contact with the audience. You looked at people, you moved around, looked in their faces, and you felt to me like you were not talking in front of an audience that might intimidate you a little bit. You were very relaxed. And oh, by the way, I really like the hat business. Taking it off, Pledge Allegiance. I happen to like hats too. And it's a cool hat. It's a cool outfit. So, at the end, I think you really did make it clear that you want us to have a debate and discuss this issue of lack of representation. The one thing I would have said at the beginning, if I were you, but I'm not you, and that is, I would have made a clear statement at the end to sum it up and say, Washington, D.C. needs to have representatives, needs to have 2 senators, needs to have so many representatives. That's what I would have done differently. Otherwise, great speech, and thank you very much. Hope I hear you again sometime. Thank you, Anthony. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Bill, for evaluating that speech. Today we had 2 great speeches and 2 great evaluations. These are some of the things that you can see if you visit your local Toastmasters club. If you're not a member, I encourage you to visit a club and see what it's all about. If you go to our website, www.d4tm.org, that's for District 4 Toastmasters, you'll find all the clubs listed in the Find a Club section. There's a map and a listing by city. Most clubs are welcome to have guests just drop in, and I'm sure that you'll find a club somewhere within our district, which, as I mentioned earlier, runs from San Francisco down to Monterey, all the way down the peninsula through the Silicon Valley. Today we had speeches from clubs in San Francisco, and our evaluators were from San Jose and Palo Alto. When you join a club, you'll be able to learn some of the things that these speakers demonstrated today and learn how to give feedback and evaluations like our evaluators did today. Those are important communication and leadership skills for real life, and hopefully those are things that you'll be able to learn when you visit a Toastmasters club and join. If you're interested in learning more about the international organization, the website is www.toastmasters.org. There are clubs in 106 countries in the world right now, about 250,000 members. So Toastmasters really is a huge global family. I hope you enjoyed our show today. Thank you for watching, and thank you for watching Toastmasters Bay to Bay.